So I'm talking to residents here. As you can see, if you're coming to this late, essentially they went from City Hall to deliver a letter to the mayor. The mayor wouldn't come out to talk to the citizens. Then they came over here to the Housing Authority to deliver a letter. The letter is basically asking for an extension till the end of till June, so that the kids could finish the school year. Not really that unreasonable. They're not going to demolish this whole complex in the matter of 2 months. And in response to that, the housing director tried to run people over, and then, including my poor cameraman there, and then called about 7 or 8 police officers. So in addition to not helping the residents in any way move for the last several months, instead of responding to the people they're supposed to be representing, she sped up with people in front of her car and tried to run them over. Maybe somebody should call the police that she's talking on her cell phone while driving. What's your name, ma'am?
Oh, Sheila, Sheilah, Garland, Garland. You don't have to ma'am me.
So, listen, I've been here a couple times now, and simply stated, they wouldn't be treating white people this way.
Well, so, obviously I take a class perspective. So and we have seen them treat white people this way. Like, look at what happened in the Love Canal. And they literally had to take over and sit down in the mayor's office, and they had to take their fight all the way to the office of the president. So corporations don't see color in that respect when they want to make profit. By the same token, we do have a very hyper-racialized society that we live in. And so the kinds of things that we see in East Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago, have an additional component of racism, because it sort of hyper sensationalizes for the rest of the country that these people are somehow separate. So you're right in that regard. But this country, this government, the corporations, they're going to make profit wherever they can make profit, and they're going to do whatever they want to do, regardless your color. So I just want to make that clear. And we have a number of white residents who don't necessarily live in this area who come out of support organizations and whatever. So I want to say that from our perspective, we stand solidly. From their perspective, they are divisive. So I think people need to understand.
I think I'm talking about when you look at Greentown, Indiana, for example, it had a problem with lead in the water. The governor, now the vice president, he went down there, and it was fixed in 2 months. So maybe that's class in addition to race, whatever. But the bottom line is, all this information came out in July. They were supposed to help residents in relocating. I've spoken with many. Many have never even spoke to the housing authority, and now they're getting a forceful eviction notice. Do you think it's pretty much they have some other plans for this place?
Well, yeah, obviously there have been plans underway for this place. I think it's close to the water. It's some place that they want to sort of build up into some sort of, who knows, some sort of high-end structures. I don't know. What I do know is that the monies that they're getting have not been enough for them to go about the business of demolishing. And so they keep going back on the basis of our demand for the emergency declaration, getting additional monies. None of those monies, or very little bit of those monies, are going toward the residents. You're talking about residents who are at the very bottom of the economic ladder in many respects, not all of the families out here, but that this housing, living here, provided them a sense of stability that they weren't able to get anywhere else, even with the low income. And so when you disrupt and dislocate people in that situation, it creates a ripple effect in society. So, and then not only that, when you talk about the homeowners who have been here for years, black and brown homeowners, we're always told that you buy a home to create wealth so that you can pass it down to your children. So we see the impact of racism when these kinds of things are dumped in black communities, right? And so that the housing that you've purchased, that you thought is going to have value to your family, no longer has any value. So that means we need to fight for compensation that's equal to the value that the home would have on the market, so that they can pass that wealth along, so that we can begin doing wealth building in our families as well. But you can't sit around and point fingers when you have all of this environmental terrorism, when you have, this political terrorism that is visited upon especially people of color, black and brown people, as you say, and we're expected to, what are we expected to do as a result? I just don't know what people expect for us to do. We have no other recourse but to fight at this point.
Well, there's also decisions being made that really don't seem to take into effect people. Just besides it not making sense to rush people out of here the mayor issued a statement, and he said it's too dangerous to keep them there. Well, why hasn't it been too dangerous for the last 8 months?
And not only that, not only has it is the I mean, you can see the inconsistencies in the way that they've approached this thing. Clearly, there was no strategic planning that was done. That was not very well thought out. It may have initially been sort of a knee-jerk reaction to the levels of lead that were being reported, but once you get past that shock, then you have to start planning and taking into consideration real people's lives. You can't just do it sort of, as a robot. And so I think those decisions that they're making do not take any of those things into consideration. And because they cut themselves off and see themselves as above the residents that live here, they have very little regard for what the impact of what his decision means to every single individual, that all the families that live in these complexes. They just don't have any regard for that. They've closed down the school over there. These kids have already moved from that school, beautiful building sitting over there empty. So they've had to be relocated to another school. Now you're going to relocate them again? Why? So we had to push for the first date, because they initially had set the date 90 days after he made his announcement. So we pushed back to another date. So the first date was November, the end of November. We pushed back, from there, we pushed back to March. Now we got to push back to June because we want everybody to be safe. So every single step of the way, we've had to fight in order to have a little semblance of humanity, sort of a part of this process. And it comes from us. It doesn't come from the city. It's not coming from the state, nor is it coming from the federal government.
And speaking of the federal government, HUD has approved this ran by that brilliant man, Ben Carson. So the housing department, you would think if, again, through no fault of their own, people have been poisoned, there'd be a little compassion and actually helping them. But the housing department, it was almost like, okay, let's check that off the list, move them out, and once they're out of East Chicago, they're no longer
an issue. There is a bureaucracy that is just mind-numbing at play in this whole situation, where I don't even have the words to express, like, how can you not know that there are real lives living here that are being impacted in ways that are just immeasurable? I mean, notwithstanding the fact that they've been living on toxic lead soil, they've probably been ingesting it through their water. We now know that there's lead in the water out here. So you have
we're standing on it.
Yeah, exactly. We have all these pathways for this neurotoxin, arsenic, and who knows what else that people have been exposed to. And to not have a single shred of humanity about how you're going to treat folks in this circumstance it's mind-boggling. It's just stunning. I just find it absolutely stunning. I'm from Flint, Michigan, and it took a while for community to get organized in Flint, but you saw the same sort of callousness from the Republican governor. You saw it from all of his administration, all the way down to the city when they had the city managers there. So they elected the new mayor, and the mayor, did the right thing by declaring an emergency. But she has just hit wall upon wall upon wall upon wall. They finally released the money, but it's been, what, two and a half years since that fight broke out.
Actually, a good promotional tool, because we're doing a town hall in Flint on Tuesday night, so you could go to my Facebook for that.
Okay. And actually, on April the 11th, we have Melissa Mays coming to Chicago. So we're putting together a regional event. We're going to be gathering in downtown Chicago on April the 11th at 3:30 in Federal Plaza. We'll have regional fighters from environmental justice communities, really addressing the Trump administration and the EPA about what's happening in our various communities. And then we're going to come back here April the 11th, the evening at 6 o'clock at the Ameristar Casino, and we'll have a public forum, and we'll have a number of people who will be speaking, and hopefully a lot of the community will come out and participate in that. So we'd like to get your help on that too. Yeah. So yeah, for sure.
One thing that strikes me is I'm in East Chicago, then I'm going to Flint, but who knows how many communities are out there that don't even know about their contamination. Exactly. I mean, I haven't, Thomas over there, he's talked about these areas like Indiana that are basically industrial toxic waste dumps. But there's communities all over the country, we have people watching right now, that were built next to factories or on top of lead or whatever the case may be. Are they going to be treated this way when the numbers come out to see how contaminated they are?
You know, and the problem is that because there's been so much industrial waste from that period in our history, there hasn't been a real collective or concerted effort on the part of our government to really go through and do a thorough sort of assessment.
You want to know why?
Tell me why.
It's the money, Lebowski. It's the money. If they got to spend money to find out, oh, those poor people, we don't, are they being exposed to lead? We don't have the money to find out.
And not only that, not only do they not want to do it, but so they just leave those communities just to die on the vine. And you go, I mean, you see the level of drug addiction, I mean, the opiate addiction that's happening in a lot of these communities that were formerly part of a thriving industrial, era. They're just dying. And people are, literally dying as a result of what happened during the industrial age and the shift that has happened where people have not been absorbed back into any part of the economy. So we create our own economies, we do all sorts of things. There's nothing is irrational if you really understand the root of it, right? I mean, you understand people's behavior because you understand what's at the root of it. But if you don't think about the root of it, and if you say it's something metaphysical or something, then you can never come to the right conclusions, and that's what's happening. There is not one shred of interest on the part of our government to go through all of these communities. California is a horrible place as far as these toxins and the pollution and the aftermath of the Industrial Revolution. But every place you go, every nook and cranny where the Industrial Revolution touched, there is this kind of fallout for people all across this country. It's just horrible.
And also, more directly, where we're standing, there's kids with learning disabilities, upper respiratory issues, behavioral problems. There's mothers who have had cancers very early on in life. There's a woman right there I've interviewed several times with, unfortunately, more illnesses than most people have in their life. And who's going to pay for all that?
Exactly. So that's why one of our demands was Medicare for all for life for the residents of East Chicago. I think under the current environment with Trump trying to do away with the Affordable Care Act, which was never adequate in the first place and was a huge nod to the insurance industries, right? But the demand for Medicare for all for everyone is certainly in line with what we see going on here and across the country. That's one of the things that we can do relatively easily in this country, and it would create more dollars, it would create more jobs. We could turn all of that profit over into the healthcare system and really doing something that's positive for our people. Every other civilized country in the world has done it. Ghana has done it, so if Ghana can do it, why can't we? Cuba exports 80,000 health care jobs. Their biggest export is healthcare. Little tiny Cuba that has had the boot of the U.S. on its neck for over 50 years can figure out how to provide healthcare for its population, and it's good healthcare.
Last question. So, when I say this, a lot of people say, oh, Jordan, don't go starting. It's possible. It's possible Mike Pence could be president one day. We don't know with Trump, with impeachment, or maybe he'll quit, or who knows. But Mike Pence is one heart attack, scandal, whatever, from the presidency. Now, most people don't know because the media doesn't cover it. He did nothing for East Chicago. He was governor. He did nothing. He did go help a white town.
Yeah, he did.
2 months later, it was fixed. Greentown, Indiana, they had lead in the water. He went down there. The problem was fixed. And it should have been, just like it should have been here.
Exactly.
So what is your message for people and for the current vice president? Because it can't, the media treats him like he's some delicate flower.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't tell him that Michael Flynn, met with the Russian ambassador, and poor Mike Pence. But he's done some pretty vile things here.
No, he's just looking at his record just over the years, he is one scary fellow. If he, God forbid, if he were to become president, I just can't even imagine how people that are struggling and a rung or two above struggling are going to make it. I mean, I just can't see it, and I think it's really kind of startling how little so many people did not know or don't understand the depths of the kind of vileness of the things that this man stands for and that he has articulated in his life as a politician. It's mind-boggling to me. So I think that we have to be mindful, as much as horrible as Trump is, you don't want to be in a position of protecting, Trump and saying that we need to safeguard him at all costs. But a Pence would just be 1,000 times worse than Trump. You know, people think we're in a bad
That's
situation.
that thought is even scary because I didn't think much could be worse than Trump. But
About 1,000 times worse. I mean, I'm sure you've researched him a lot. I've done a lot of research. He's a really, really despicable human being. I just have nothing. I can't find anything positive in his history that I could share. I just can't. And so that would be frightening. Already we've got the naked, I mean, the corporations nakedly run this country. We have no more government. There's no more democracy. When you have the corporations that are directly ruling the halls of government, we didn't elect those people. They're being appointed. So they don't represent our values. They don't represent our interests. They don't represent what we stand for. They represent the corporations and the billionaires, and that's their agenda. And God help us all, because I mean, I hate to say this, but I think we're going to end up in a huge war. They have really no other recourse but to go in that direction. That's where they're going to make mega bucks. And they're going to keep, you know, letting communities like this die on the vine until we organize, get ourselves together, and recognize that we can have a different future. Absolutely.
April 11th, Chicago, Federal Plaza, 3:30. There's going to be people from whether it's Flint, East Chicago, other areas affected by this environmental catastrophes and racism. Then they're going to come back here to East Chicago for a forum at night. I'll get more information. I'll send it out to you guys. And yeah, we'll be in East Chicago this weekend speaking with people. And the mayor will be hearing from me and you more. Because I don't think it's right to forcefully evict families that have already been victims for the last 20 and 30 years. Yeah, that you know, maybe it doesn't need to necessarily just be a race thing, but the bottom line is people with money and a certain color are not treated this way in America. And on Long Island, where I grew up, if I tried to get somebody to just take a letter from me, I wouldn't have her attempt to run me over with a vehicle. So stay tuned. You could go to watch more of these videos on youtube.com/TYTpolitics. Instead of binging Netflix tonight, watch the Indiana lead poisoning playlist. There's about 30 videos on there. I've been here 3 or 4 times, and we'll be doing more. Because you know what? While the media likes to focus on Russia and Donald Trump's boogers and all this stuff, people are dying, and people are being evicted, and people are being trampled. And if you don't do anything about it, and I don't do anything about it, the United Corporations of America will continue until we're all under the ground.